Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lioncast Wrestling Crew, where we have a very special episode. But before that, let me first introduce my co-host, as always, JP.
Hey guys, what's up? We got a nice episode for you here. Thanks for tuning in again.
And longtime friend and permanent member of the Lioncast Wrestling Crew, Troy.
Hey guys, it's good to be back. I know I missed the last one. I'm round and ready to go.
Alright, so first, as always, let's get into the news.
Time for news.
All right, we're going to start with the heavy stuff here first. Seems like every podcast we're announcing somebody's death. This is usually the reality of the wrestling business that we know and love as we learn how to say goodbye. This first goodbye is tough for me as somebody that has grown up with the wrestling business, whether it was watching it or even briefly working in the wrestling business. One of my childhood idols, the Patriot Dale Wilkes, passed away at 59 of a heart attack. This was actually on June 30th. This is after we last recorded our most recent episode. He wasn't perfect. Okay, he had his demons. He had his run-ins with drugs and law enforcement and everything. But growing up his whole career as the Patriot, he embodied everything that was good about the United States as far as being patriotic, loving your country, and representing the ideals of this country. He was always that one that I looked up to. I started watching him when he was on when in GCW, Global Championship Wrestling. I would watch him every week after school on ESPN, and he was their U.S. champion twice. Then he went to WCW, which won half Stars and Stripes, and won the tag team titles with Marcus Bagwell. And then, of course, he had a brief foray into the WWF at the time and feuded with Bret Hart, even having a win over Bret Hart. And then, before I know it, he was gone out of the WWF. He accomplished a lot in Japan as well, and he was a Hall of Fame college football player for the University of South Carolina as a lineman. And then I had the pleasure of meeting him. They say don't meet your heroes. I was maybe 16 years old, had a very weird time of my life. I was sleeping on friends' couches. I was homeless, but I went to an indie show that I saved up my money to get to go to and got to meet him and King Kong Bundy in the ring. I just remember Del being more than gracious to me. He was the one that invited me into the ring, shook my hand, had a long conversation with me. I remember I have a Polaroid somewhere of him standing next to me with me holding his title on my shoulder. It was the first wrestling belt I ever got to hold in my life. I mean, I was a big wrestling fan always growing up, but that really solidified me with wrestling. That turned me into a wrestling fanatic, and that made me really start loving the actual business. Just that kind of impactful meeting. There's people that aren't fans of Del Wilkes for his past actions. Perhaps they might have had, some run-ins with him over his, beliefs and opinions on social media. That's between him and them. But I'm always going to remember how he was to me. And I appreciate everything he's done in the ring, but I appreciated what he did for this 16-year-old kid. And I wish him the best upstairs. I know he's cleaned up his life. Rest in peace, Del. Yeah, all right, we're going to move on to the next death in wrestling. This one was a big one. In my opinion, one of the founding fathers of WrestleMania. He was in the first WrestleMania main event as a tag team partner of Roddy Piper against Mr. T and Hulk Hogan, with Muhammad Ali as the special guest referee. But I'm talking about the late, great Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. He died at 71 on July 12th. We know he wasn't in good health for quite some time. He's going to go down as having best physiques in the history of wrestling, and in my opinion, the best pile driver in the history of wrestling. He was iconic. I mean, I grew up with his LJN figure, and he was the only person in real life whose physique looks just like the physique on the wrestling figure. It was ridiculous. Just one of the all-time greats, and he's going to be missed. I feel like he maybe never got his due after he left the wrestling business. Did get in the Hall of Fame, but he was never really brought up as much as the others. But I think he was every bit the icon as some of these bigger names in the 80s were.
With me, I wasn't really super well-knowing of the Patriot, but I did remember watching him as I was growing up. And I remember so much about how he was like one of the few masked wrestlers I actually saw back then. I was still kind of new into the wrestling scene. I mean, well, I liked the wrestling, but it was mostly like WWF stuff. And I remember him being like the major and like only real masked wrestler at the time. But what really got me kind of interested in him was his feud with Bret Hart. Even though it was short, Bret himself has even said like that was one of his favorite kind of feuds, even though it was short, because he got along so well with him backstage. And the other thing about him, which is funny enough, the real reason I remember the Patriot is I used to constantly play the WWF Warzone game. And I would always pick the Patriot because out of all of the other characters, he was the most well-rounded. And I remember I'd always play as the Patriot and I'd always like usually win. But anytime I played like the main guys, you know, like Bret Hart or Stone Cold, I'd always lose. So it's just kind of funny how a guy who wasn't as appreciated as in his time, same thing with Mr. Wonderful, ended up kind of having at least some form of impact on others. Like you even told your story about how he kind of made you a diehard fan, and you never can take away those moments from people. You know, regardless of what position they are in a company, it's more to do with the impact you leave behind. It's your legacy that you leave behind that really determines who you are as a person. Mr. Wonderful, obviously, he cemented his legacy. He was always teaming with Roddy Piper. I always picture him with Roddy Piper. Him and Roddy were best friends in real life, and I'm sure it really took a number on him when he passed. After Mr. Wonderful died, I saw a picture, and it got me kind of upset because it said all of Hulk Hogan's opponents from WrestleMania 1 to 6 are now gone. They're all passed away. Mr. Wonderful was the last one. And it didn't really dawn on me until I looked at that post, and I'm like, wow, that is crazy. All these guys were impactful with the world of wrestling, and now they're all gone. It's just kind of bizarre. But I also know Mr. Wonderful was suffering quite a lot health-wise, and I, as a person who has dealt with a lot of grief in my life, I'm more just happy he's not suffering anymore. But like I said, any loss in the wrestling world, we are essentially a family, so rest in peace to both of them.
I mean, I kind of feel a little bit bad because I'm, I guess, the younger one in the group, and I never really got to see Del in person. I saw like a handful of matches on various shows, but never really got to see him on a consistent basis just because of my age and when I started watching. It seems like he did touch your life, JP, and I really appreciate that. And, you know, I can sympathize with that, and it was a really good story. I was just, you know, listening to it, and it got to me. And I mean, we're all going to have that. There's certain people that touch us like that. So that's, I mean, it feels good that someone, you know, touched you like that. And I can really appreciate that a lot. But I remember switching over to Mr. Wonderful. I remember a couple years back, I want to say maybe 5 or 6, I went to, this is when the network was still the network in the US. And I went, and I was a couple weeks before WrestleMania, and I decided I'm going to rewatch all the WrestleManias in a row. I remember watching, you know, Mr. T and Hogan against Mr. Wonderful and Roddy, and I was just like, wow, I mean, they didn't have the talent in the ring that they do nowadays, but just the heel work that they could do and how they could get the crowd against them. It was fantastic. So I've seen him a little bit more, but not much. Two legends of the game that passed away, and just tough losses. You know, they gave their lives to this sport, and, you know, that's all we could ask, and hopefully they're not suffering anymore, which is a good thing.
Some positive news. Well, it was briefly positive in this, where Keith Lee has finally made his long-awaited return to the ring after 7 months, returning on July 19th, Monday Night Raw, only to be squashed by Bobby Lashley. Following week, he gets squashed again by Karrion Kross. Now he makes a post, which he later deleted, stating that he is basically indicating that he's upset that he's been back 2 weeks and he's been squashed in his first 2 weeks back. Also, Karrion Kross debuted on the July 19th Raw and loses to Jeff Hardy. He comes out with his entrance taken away from him without Scarlett, loses to Jeff Hardy in about 2 minutes. It turns out that this is a possible punishment for his backstage conduct, stemming from an argument that he had with Adam Cole backstage. The NWA will be having their women's pay-per-view Empower, which airs on August 28th in St. Louis, and they've announced 3 matches. Camille defending the NWA Women's title against to be announced. We also have the NWA Women's Tag Team titles on the line. They have not announced the participants in that match. And also, Deonna Purrazzo is set to defend her Knockouts title against a mystery opponent to be named later. I also know that Gail Kim has been invited to participate on the NWA Empower pay-per-view. And moving on to some bigger news, the WWE Queen of the Ring Finals is rumored to be taking place in Saudi Arabia on October 21st. WWE is craving more blood money. Probably the heaviest rumors of the past week that Daniel Bryan and CM Punk are both rumored to be signing or have signed already with AEW, with Daniel Bryan scheduled to make his debut at the Arthur Ashe Stadium event in New York City. And then finally, Jack and Troy and myself love this the most. Jay White crashes Kenny Omega's championship win at Slammiversary and has indicated that he is next in line for a feud with Kenny Omega. And the past couple weeks, they've been exchanging promos. And Chris Bay has now been named as the new member of the Bullet Club. So that's huge as well. Guys, what do you think of all this? I know I left a lot to unpack here.
Okay, I'll go from start to finish, I guess. The Keith Lee and Karrion Kross, I'm furious because they're both super talented in their own right. I mean, Keith Lee was a dual champion in NXT. Even before he was in NXT, he was a superstar on the independent scene, had fantastic matches with guys like Donovan Dijak, a.k.a. Dominic Dijakovic, who is also getting crapped on the main roster. There's so many matches of Keith that I've seen. I thought when he finally got signed to NXT, it was the big time for him and he was going to flourish because he's a big guy. Once you get to the main roster, if you're huge like that, most of the time you get a significant push. Hasn't happened. Karrion Kross, they built him up as a monster. I understand punishing him, but send him to the main roster to lose to Jeff Hardy. I mean, Jeff's at the tail end of his career, and I understand he's a legend. He's been around for a long time, and I guess the loss might be humbling, but I don't get it. I don't get either of those two, what they're doing to them on the main roster. And you'd think that Kross would be someone that Vince would look at and, lose his mind over, but apparently that's not the case. And with him not having Scarlett is a big step down. If you haven't seen the entrance without Scarlett, just don't. It's terrible. I mean, the song doesn't work. It doesn't work without her dancing. It doesn't work without the smoke. None of it works. And then Power pay-per-view I'm excited for, especially if Gail Kim comes back. I love Gail Kim. Whoever the opponents are going to be for Camille and Deonna Purrazzo are going to be perfect choices. Same with the tag team championships. I'm glad those are going to be defended. And we're going to crown new champions there, too. Queen of the Ring, I just saw that news today, and that doesn't make sense to me. None of it makes sense to me. That might be the dumbest thing I've heard in a long time, and it's WWE, so they do a lot of dumb things, but this might be the worst. Bryan and Punk, I'm excited. Hopefully they can bring some more, I guess, veteran presence. I mean, seeing Punk have a match, again, going to be very impactful for a lot of people, especially around my age that, remember seeing him on WWE ECW back in the mid to late 2000s, and Ring of Honor fans too. There's a lot of potential dream matches that could happen with Punk, especially if he gets treated properly in a company that he deserves to be treated properly in. And Daniel Bryan's Daniel Bryan. My thoughts are known about him. He's one of my favorite wrestlers probably ever. If his contract details are correct, where he can work dates in Japan, I'm all for it. That was one of the things that I really wanted, and especially with how much leeway Tony Khan's been giving his talent, working with other companies too. One of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head would be Bryan and Gresham in a pure match in Ring of Honor. I don't know what I would do if I saw that. And Jay White crashing Impact, fantastic. I love Jay. And him bringing Chris Bay into the Bullet Club. I said this, I think it was 2 podcasts ago, that he was my star to watch, and if he gets in the Bullet Club, his his stardom just skyrocketed. He's already talented enough, former X Division champion too, but if you're in the Bullet Club, 90% of the time you're pushed into the stratosphere, and you're going to get some form of title in New Japan, most likely.
I'll get more into my thoughts on Keith Lee and Karrion Kross later in the podcast when we get to the main subject. But short version is Vince has made it 100% clear that he does not neither care about NXT or its talent. It seems as though he's more or less trying to say that in a way that he's trying to basically make an example of the NXT talent for daring to be more appreciated by Triple H than by Vince. It's hard to explain, but it's kind of like an older brother who loses a video game to their younger brother, and then they just break their controller. That's basically the quickest equivalent I can make to it. But moving from that to the Queen of the Ring, it's hilariously stupid, but it's also not surprising because of Vince. As we all know, Saudi Arabia, if it's known for anything, it's known for its great laws to treat everyone fairly and equally, especially women. That's their brand. That's their name brand. Everyone knows that. But in all seriousness, this is the stupidest freaking decision I've ever heard. That would be like a vegetarian running a meat eaters convention. It's so stupid. Chris Bay joining the Bullet Club. Fantastic choice. I've been a fan of Chris Bay for a long time. I think he's really, really talented. And Jay White getting involved. There's a whole conspiracy I came up with. It's a theory I came up with a couple of years way back. And my theory is still actually holding firm. My theory is that eventually the Bullet Club is going to take over the world. In the way, not in the sense of like they're going to do what the elite do and basically book themselves to be gods. I'm talking in the sense of they will be the catalyst to join wrestling promotions. And my theory holds more firm with Chris Bay signing as a member of the Bullet Club because of the fact I think Jay, as intelligent as he is going to do what Kenny started, and that is scout and add talent to the Bullet Club from separate promotions. That way a representative of each brand will have a Bullet Club member, thus uniting them and spreading out their titles around to different companies. That's my big theory of what's going to happen. And honestly, I would pay to see that. I mean, just the idea of a Bullet Club member in Ring of Honor, NWA, Impact, AEW. I mean, just the idea of that, and then like have one in AAA, they got all of them in New Japan, and they all just combine together, and that sells tickets. That's it. It just sells tickets. The only problem I have with that is I see a lot of ego interfering with that, specifically from the elite. Jay is always 3 steps ahead, not just as a character, as a person. Like, he actually understands the wrestling industry better than anyone. And for being so young and being so, like, intellectually veteran-brained is crazy good. Deonna Purrazzo, I think right now, as opposed to a lot of women in the industry who are going, I'm the best, she's proving it. Because as the Impact Knockouts champion, she's had great matches, great defenses, and on top of that, not only is she going to be at the NWA pay-per-view, she's also going to be at Triple Mania, which is AAA's top pay-per-view, and she's going to fight their top women's champion. So it's going to be a champion versus champion match at Triple Mania as well. So the fact that she's actually willing to go, hey, I'll fight the best of the best. Like, she's not saying like, oh, I'm the best. She's just going out there and doing it, which is insanely admirable. I mean, because Thunder Rosa did that exact same thing. And let's be honest, women's wrestling has been better off for it. It seems like Deonna's kind of going in that mindset of like, spread the word. Like, women can do what men can do kind of thing. And it's about time. I'm excited to see what's going to come out of all of this.
That's right, baby. It's time to TCB, and I'm not talking about taking care of business. That's right, it's time for title change business. Oh, mama.
That's right, it's time to TCB. So let's look at all the major title changes that have happened over the month of July.
All right, first things first, we're going to start off with GCW Homecoming here. Matt Cardona wins the world title, defeating Nick Gage in a death match. The next title change here comes from Impact, where Fire and Flava have lost their Knockouts tag team titles to the Decay, Havoc, and Rosemary at Slammiversary. Also at Slammiversary, the Good Brothers won the Impact tag team titles from Violent by Design, part of a four-way match with Falaba and No Way, and Rich Swann and Willie Mack. Move over to Major League Wrestling. Alexander Hammerstone won the third annual Battle Royal, winning a 40-man match, last eliminating Mads Kruger. So with this win, Alexander Hammerstone gets to challenge for the MLW heavyweight title. He gets to name his time and place for his title shot. He is currently also the MLW National Openweight Champion.
Over at New Japan Pro Wrestling, Tetsuya Naito and Sanada won the IWGP Tag Team Championships, beating Dangerous Tekkers, Taichi, and Zack Sabre Jr. Then, 2 weeks after, Zack Sabre Jr. and Taichi regained the tag team titles at Wrestle Grand Slam. After that, even though this match took place in AEW, Lance Archer finally dethroned John Can't Be Bothered to Show Up Moxley to become the new IWGP United States Champion, ending his 564-day reign as champion. After that, the new IWGP Junior Champion, Robbie Eagles, defeated El Desperado, making him the first Australian-born IWGP Junior Champion. And in a minor note, Chase Owens is now also the KOPW champion, winning in a gauntlet-style match.
In NXT, only one title change happened recently, past month. The Way, Candice LeRae, and Indy Hartwell were defeated by the new team of Io Shirai and Zoe Stark for the NXT Women's Tag Team Championship.
Over in NWA, Chris Adonis regained the NWA National Championship.
In Ring of Honor, multiple title changes happened in the same night at Best in the World, first being one of my favorite wrestlers. Dragon Lee won the television title from Tony Deppen, who I think should have gotten a longer run. The team of Homicide and Chris Dickinson beat the Foundation for the tag team titles. And Bandito, who I really didn't think was going to win, actually dethroned and beat Roosh for the Ring of Honor World Championship. All three fantastic matches and a very, very good show by Ring of Honor, too.
In a surprise, as we never really seem to talk about them, over in Stardom, the Future of Stardom title finals between Mina Shirakawa and Unagi Sayaka to claim the vacated title was won by Mina Shirakawa.
Now moving over to the WWE, the Usos won the SmackDown Tag Team titles, defeating the Mysterios, making this their 7th Tag Team title reign. They won this on the Money in the Bank pre-show. Charlotte won the Raw Women's Championship for Rhea Ripley at Money in the Bank. Big E won the Men's Money in the Bank match. Nikki, almost a superhero, won the Money in the Bank ladder match and cashed in the following night on Charlotte to become the Raw Women's Champion for the first time in her career.
This is actually going to be a very different podcast than we normally do. Today, we are going to be doing a State of Wrestling. We're planning on doing this about once every year or so, maybe once every 6 months, I'm not too sure. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the overall landscape of wrestling as a whole right now. Things that stand out, things that we think should be improved, and potential things that we can see happening over the pipeline. So, with that being said, let's first, in order to go forward, let's go back and kind of look at how wrestling has changed through the pandemic from the beginning of the pandemic to now. So, I think the biggest change in my mind is probably, it seems as though the fan interaction has become more intense. Personally, I feel that it's like an intensity that can be kind of toxic, but it's also really positive in the same way. So it's like not giving someone food for so long, and now that there's food, now they're like starving for more. I don't know. Maybe it's just me reading too much into it. What do you guys think?
I agree. Since fans have not been allowed at shows, almost now they're being allowed back. It's like some fans are legitimate happy to be back. A lot of the performers are happy to see the fans back, but also there is a sect of fans that I feel like they have some sense of entitlement, thinking that, hey, you guys are grateful to have us back. I want this, I want this, I want this, blah, 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 blah. That can be very toxic. A lot of them, expect everything to be given to them. They want shows booked the way they want them booked. I think it really goes two different ways. Sadly, we all get lumped together by a lot of people involved in the wrestling business. And I think that's sad, but I don't blame them in a certain way. All you have to do is just look at Twitter.
I can agree with you, honestly, because with what we saw with what happened with the fan running out in Jericho's entrance, the first live show back for AEW is just ridiculous. People were just been pent up and inside their houses and stuck at home and not working and not being able to go out and do anything. I guess people just get pent up and frustrated, but there's the toxicity in it it overweighs their feelings, in my opinion. Like, there's no need for that. Maybe the bottles getting thrown at Cardona too. That could have possibly been a work, but we don't know. Different things being talked about in that aspect. But it could be good. We haven't seen the wrestlers live for a year and a half basically, and we just want that interaction. Like you said, JP, that some people are ruining it, and we all get lumped together. It sucks where some guys can ruin it, but I for one, first wrestling show I get to go to after this pandemic's over, I'm ecstatic. And if they do meet and greets, I am signing up for as many as I possibly can. So I for one am I agree that the fan interaction is good, and we're just thirsting for that interaction with them. But some people can ruin it, which sucks.
And speaking from the fan interaction perspective too, I think there's two different ways that these feds are going about it. As far as fan interaction, I think Ring of Honor and New Japan have been second to none with the way they treat their fans and respect their fans and show their fans appreciation. AEW, to some degree, is up there as well. The fans tend to show their gratefulness towards that. There's still some dickhead fans there. But honestly, as far as the toxic fans with the WWE, I wonder if WWE kind of feeds that a little bit with how a lot of their performers treat their fans on social media. There's a way to handle disrespectful fans, but when these wrestlers are going out of their way to be disrespectful to fans on social media, from talking down to them, just being awful people. You see Mia Yim doing that a lot. A lot of time, she is standing up for people, but there's times that she goes out of her way to pick a fight with fans. Seth Rollins is another one. Sasha Banks is another one. Sometimes they all seem to go out of their way to be dickheads to fans on social media. It's not always necessary. And honestly, I wonder if the WWE kind of has some sort of mindset that's going around that we all know they don't listen to their fans. You see that on the booking. You just wonder if that's being taught. When you see fans getting treated like that, it just makes you more pissed off at the product. Makes you more pissed off at them. And of course, you're going to see them directing that a lot to the performers because that's who they see first on these social media pages. So I just wonder how much of this toxicity is just misdirected anger sometimes. But I'm just trying to give some perspective as to what could be feeding that as well.
In my mind, there's two forms of a wrestler's interaction with fans. I call them gassers and adults. So the gassers are the ones who basically feed off of the negativity, and they want to just add more negativity into the universe and make it worse. A perfect example is there has been, I don't know why, I legitimately can't understand why. Literally in this past 4 months, there have been numerous death threats to wrestlers, to fans, to people, all for doing something as simple as spreading their opinions. Like Jim Ross, good old JR, got a legit death threat, multiple death threats for having the audacity at the last show to accidentally say WWE Dynamite. That's it. That's all he did. He accidentally, slip of the tongue, said WWE. And since that day, every day he's had death threats.
I just don't get that either. People make mistakes. We're human. Nobody's perfect. He's older as well. So, you have to give the guy credit. He's been doing it for so long to be his age and do, at a minimum, a 2-hour wrestling show every single week. That'll put a lot of strain on everybody. And people slip up. See, I just did. People slip up. And, He's human. There's
Exactly.
no reason for that.
On top of that, it's not like he was working for WWE for over 20 years. Of course he's going to say that. I bet you money the first couple tapings of Raw or like of WWF when he first started working, he's accidentally called it WCW. Because remember, he worked for WCW for over a decade. So it's like, of course he's probably going to slip up. It happens. But then it goes above and beyond. So as you mentioned before, JP, they had the whole incident with Matt Cardona winning the GCW world title. Whoop-de-doo. No one really cares. Fine, it's a title. It's a deathmatch title, whatever. Since then, not just Matt Cardona, but Chelsea Green, his fiance, is getting death threats. Then on top of that, the one that's the egregious. This is the absolute worst. This is the absolute worst one. This needs a little bit of context. A couple of months ago, there's been a guy on Twitter, and he goes by the name, and he even had a YouTube channel called AEW Botches. What he'd do is he'd show clips of AEW to basically point out, like, why are these green wrestlers, who were clearly green, screwing up basic simple moves? Like, do something simple as like missing the ropes or like, clotheslining and just stuff that's like literally wrestling 101. And they're pointing them out so that way they can improve on them and kind of poke fun at them at the same time. Like Botchamania. They're not there to say, you suck. They're saying it to go, isn't it kind of goofy? We all can get a little laugh, a little vaudevillian laugh, whatever. Take a joke every once in a while. Joey Janela was so upset about it, he doxed the guy. He found out the guy's real name, his address, posted it on his Twitter, and told all of the fans to go after this guy. This guy his job was bombarded with calls of people trying to get him fired. He had his tires slashed. He had his mailbox full of death threats for not just him, but his pregnant wife. And he got so upset that he literally posted this long series of tweets, deleted his YouTube and deleted his Twitter. And the last message was equivalent to saying, he showed photos, he explained the situation, and he said, I used to be the biggest wrestling fan. I've been watching it for over 20 years. And now just hearing the word wrestling is causing me PTSD. I've had to move me and my wife away. I can never even think about the word wrestling now. I have to take anti-anxiety pills, and I'm worried about my life and my wife and my child's safety. And that, to me, is the ultimate detriment to what these fans are doing. This is what we end up looking like because of these assholes. And I'm like, look, we're not like that. None of us are. Yeah, I'm not like that. You guys got kids. You guys would be like, what the hell? This stupid tribalism of like liking a brand is one thing. Like, good example. I'm a big fan of In-N-Out Burger. Okay, like I like In-N-Out Burger, great burger place. But if someone says, I prefer McDonald's, that doesn't give me carte blanche to deck them in the face. Like, no. like what you like and move the fuck on. Like, I always say this everyone likes a specific flavor of ice cream. That's totally fine. You like a specific flavor of ice cream or topping or whatever. Cool. Awesome. But you don't get the right to smack my ice cream out of my hand because I'm not eating the flavor you like. It's the same principle. And that's why I said there's the gaslighters, like Joey Janela, and then there's the adults, like Jay White. Keith Lee's really good. Tommy End's a good example where, yes, they get trolls. Yes, they get criticized. Yes, they get run down. But they take the lumps on their chin, like they do with all wrestling, and go, is it really worth it? Like, is it really worth fighting? And then you got the guys like Randy Orton, whose jimmies get so damn ruffled. I'm like, dude, you're a 14-time champion, and you're acting worse than indie wrestlers I know. I'm like, it's pathetic. Like, I shouldn't have to be the guy who's telling you to be an adult. That's the world we're in now, I guess.
One person whose approach I really appreciate how he deals with it a lot is Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens is like, you know what? No, you're blocked. That's it. He blocks them, no questions asked, doesn't feed into it. He'll block, and then he'll post the interaction as one last dig. Silas Young is another one. He'll make his point, and he'll move on. Back to the Joey Janela thing. Honestly, I think Joey Janela should have faced something for feeding into that. Honestly, I have very strong feelings against doxing. Joey Janela should hold some culpability there, and there should have been some sort of punishment issued down to him because the way he acts on social media is reprehensible. That is not how you represent a major pro wrestling company. Then again, AEW doesn't give a shit about how they're represented by their talent, as we see several different examples of that.
Yeah, it's hilarious how a company that's so morally superior, because that's the thing. It's not that they actually are or are not morally superior. It's the fact that they have to tell you that they are. It's the fact that they have to go out of their way to tell you, hey, we treat our people so much better. We're so much more adult. We're so much more rational and easygoing, and you could trust your people with us. And yet, they've had more sexual predators, criminals, and a ton of other terrible people working under their flag and banner. I'm not saying WWE is necessarily a top company as far as morality, but at least they do a basic background check. You know, at least they wipe their feet. That's all I'm saying. Like
if AEW could have gotten away with it, Marty Scurll would be main eventing their shows right now.
Absolutely. And I really think that's true. Don't you, Troy? I think that's true. If they had it their way, they would have had Marty Scurll on the card already.
Or someone like David
Idol.
Starr. I mean, David Starr would be in there somewhere.
Joey Ryan.
You know, Joey Ryan, David
Ryan.
Starr, somebody just making the product look trash. I wouldn't watch. JP can attest to this. As soon as I heard about David Starr, I was crushed. I mean, I loved his work and I loved his heel work, but it's beside the point. It sucks because they're a new company, and I really think that Tony Khan's just trying to give the fans the best product, but in that sense too, he's just signing everybody. I mean, It doesn't matter who you are or what happened.
As Shad Khan builds his Jacksonville football team into a playoff contender, he's eventually going to cut that money off from AEW. It's coming. He's going to grow tired of AEW not turning a profit for him.
I agree. I think so too. And you know what is irritating? I think you watch enough wrestling. There was a long series of like elitist gatekeeping of like, you either like this brand or you like this brand or you only like that. Wasn't there like a long ass like, oh, I don't watch WWE, I watch TNA. That's real wrestling. Or like, I only watch WWE because that TNA crap. You know, that garbage like line splitting thing, you know? Like, you guys remember that whole thing, right? Like, the feud between them?
I do. It's starting again. As soon as AEW started, I knew this was going to happen. If you enjoy the product, just watch it. And don't piss on other people for liking what they like. If they're not hurting you, if they're not doing anything detrimental to you, just shut the hell up. I'm getting so sick of people on social media when I see posts. Like, the one that I can think of that's really popular right now is the moron who, 15 plus years later said Eddie Guerrero was a B plus player. At that point, you're just pushing people's buttons. I mean, you're just being a dick, honestly.
Yeah.
Why would you talk about someone who's been dead for 15 plus years, literally an idol to hundreds, if not thousands of wrestlers and probably millions of people across the world?
And has inspired more wrestlers than I guarantee you that guy will even ever meet in his life.
Exactly. Sasha Banks is one of the top female talents in WWE. And, I mean, she's late 20s, early 30s? I think she's about close to my age. I mean, she grew up like I did watching Eddie and idolized Eddie, has had attire inspired by him, used Frog Splash. You can tell Kevin Owens was influenced by him. TJP. Ray still does some things with him. El Hijo de Fantasma still does things with him. Andrade, just all the Latin American wrestlers and Latin wrestlers, they idolized him. And I don't know if you're being serious. If he's being serious, he's very wrong. Or if you're just pushing people's buttons just to push people's buttons and try and get popular.
Or like how Seth Rollins had all of his Twitter trolls attack Dave Meltzer, and now everyone's trying to discredit Dave Meltzer and saying that he is the least credible guy. Him? Dave effing Meltzer? Like, I know a lot of people didn't know who he was, and I understood that. But the fact of the matter is, this is the guy who is the wrestling journalist. He is the gold standard for wrestling journalism. He's not a gossip columnist. This is a guy who has had people he knows, still knows, who've been a part of every major wrestling promotion behind the scenes. Every one of them. Every one of them respect him. And to give this whole BS of like, well, Seth Rollins is going to have his trolls attack him because he had the audacity to say, maybe he shouldn't have used the buckle bomb because it was a dangerous move. That's the whole reason. And that's not hyperbole. That's a fact. He should have never done that move.
No, because he hurt Finn. He hurt Sting. Who else has he hurt with that move? I mean, it's not.
I think he tore. Didn't he also tear like Cesaro's like rotator cuff doing it or something?
I think so. I mean,
and yet served no ramifications for it. That's the worst part about it. He didn't get any ramifications for it. That jackass Peter Rosenberg, who he's like, you need to trust the real journalists like me and Sam Roberts. And I'm like, motherfuckers, you were both radio DJs, and then you marked out for WWE, and now you work with them. Why am I going to trust the word of the guys who work for the company? I'm never going to trust the word of a company, man. I don't care who it is. If Tony Khan's secretary told me, you got to check out AEW, I'm not going to listen to you. You work there.
Exactly. With the whole Meltzer thing, I mean, it's not like he's been the main publisher and writer for Wrestling Observer for almost 30 years. I mean, what does he know? You know, like, are you serious? Like, he knows what he's talking about. He's probably seen millions of matches and, you know, been to so many different shows and watched thousands upon thousands of hours of material. He probably knows what he's talking about.
And yet we have the Jim Cornettes of the world that use their platform. Instead of making the business better, you know, he uses his platform to influence how many people into discrediting Dave Meltzer and feeding into that week after week after week of his awful show that he uses as nothing better but to tear down everybody in the business instead of help building up the fucking business. Jim Cornette is a freaking cancer to the industry.
People try to lump in Meltzer with Vince Russo and Jim Cornette. Vince Russo and Jim Cornette are cut from the same piece of crap cloth. Dave Meltzer is a guy, whether you like him or not, whether you respect him or not, is irrelevant. He respects and cares about the industry. He has loved this industry. He's lost best friends from this industry. He was best friends with Brian Pillman. He's been best friends with Owen Hart. He's been best friends with Eddie and all these other famous wrestlers, and he's seen all of his friends die. Like, he's actually said repeatedly, like, I'm tired of burying my friends. And it's sad because, like, you don't stay in the game this long without having a love for it. And the fact is, like, all of us love it. Like, I love it. Troy and JP, I know you guys love the wrestling industry, but the toxicity prevents others from enjoying it. That's the worst part about it. Like, they're preventing new legions from even attempting to enjoy it. That's why I'm such a stan for New Japan and Jay White and the Bullet and these certain wrestlers that I know are trying to break that stigma, break the whole toxic BS of the singular mindset of like, this is this and this is that. No. You look at women like Thunder Rosa and Deonna Purrazzo, Mickie James, the women of Stardom. They're trying to make women's wrestling more relevant than it's ever been. And who gets all the credit? Charlotte. You look at New Japan. They have been the gold standard of so many years for wrestling talent, and yet no one cares until they came to the States. Like, Kenny gets the braggadocious thing of he created the Bullet Club. No, he didn't. He wasn't even close to creating the Bullet Club. He was a guy who joined the Bullet Club and made it popular. That's it.
In front of Tama Tonga.
Oh, no, he never would. And that's the thing. Like, I got into a huge argument with a guy. I said, Tama Tonga, on a podcast, his own podcast, he wasn't coerced into saying this, mind you. He literally said, there's only been 2 official leaders of the Bullet Club. 2. Fergal Devitt, a.k.a. Finn Balor, and Jay White. He said, yes, AJ Styles and Kenny Omega were at one point in charge of the Bullet Club, but they were not elected to be in charge of the Bullet Club. We wanted to work with them. They shoehorned themselves as leaders. We never said, hey, you're our leader at all. And the entire time they were leading, I'm like, he's right. And he literally said the reason we did not acknowledge them as a leader as a whole is because they didn't go through the rankings that we did. He said Fergal and Jay were young lions. They were both young Lion graduates. They went through the trenches with them. Like, they know how hard it took them to get to that platform. They've seen the struggles they went through. The scrubbing of the floors and the holding the bags and, you know, watching and getting the crap kicked out of them every week by Suzuki. You know, like the trenches of that stuff, to know, understand the respect of the ring in order to thrive in it. And Jay has used that experience to broaden this giant demographic to go, When Fergal came to New Japan, he was hand-chosen by none other than Jushin Thunder Liger. In the exact same way, Jushin Thunder Liger and Keiji Muto were hand-selected by Antonio Inoki. No one wanted to work with them. He hand-chose those two, hey, come work for me. Jushin did the same thing with Finn, and Keiji did the same thing with Katsuyori Shibata. And in that same way, Finn hand-chose Jay White. He chose right. The other person he hand-trained was Becky Lynch. And to say Becky Lynch hasn't succeeded would be a detriment to her, because their goals are all the same. The whole point I'm getting to, their goals are the same as mine, as JP, as Troy, and that is to make wrestling better. We're not running it down to go, hey, wrestling sucks, don't watch it, like, Steven Larson do, or Wrestle Talk do, or all these other jackasses on YouTube that go, hey, wrestling sucks. Anyways, tune in next week to see why wrestling sucks. No, we actually talk about why we want an improvement, why we think it could, and how it could. Because there's a difference between running down and actually criticizing. At least I think. Enough of my ranting. I'll pass it over to you guys. What do you guys think?
I'm in full agreement. People think that just because we're fans, we just need to sit there and enjoy the fucking show. And I get insulted every time I hear that. When I hear that sentiment from performers, I just think, what an arrogant statement to say. And, I think that does feed a lot of negativity, because there are a lot of these performers that are completely drunk off their own hype and have lost what it feels like to have your livelihood depend on whether somebody buys your t-shirts that you sell out of a box in the back of your car after every indie show. I think there's been a complete loss of perspective. Again, I go back to saying, I think this sentiment is being taught by these bigger feds, that when they hit a certain level, that just because they have a lot more fans, suddenly they don't have time for them anymore. While I get, you can't devote all your time, but there's a growing disconnect between performers and these fans anymore. And they think just because we're not in there getting ourselves injured in the ring because we haven't trained. That's one other thing I hear. Oh, you haven't trained for the right to be here. You know who I hear that a lot? Even if he's saying that on the shows and he's booked to say it, Eddie Kingston. He'll say that to cameramen, whether he's in character or not. I still hate hearing it. Oh, you didn't train to be in this ring. Get the fuck out of here. They have that fraternity, whether they're on the inside and you have to pay your dues or whatever. But I think fans being alienated purposely like that really turns fans off from the industry. When they support something, they spend all this hard-earned money on supporting a wrestling product, you want to feel like you're, in a way, part of it, not saying booked on a show, or you want to feel appreciated. You want to feel like you're doing something. You don't want to feel like you're just feeding your money to some machine. Those of us fans that legit feel this way, and we just want to be appreciated because we want what's best for the industry as a whole. We want what's best for the performers. We want what's best for the people running the company. We want what's best for ourselves as well. We want what's best as a whole. And then there's that toxicity. They want everything handed to them by these performers too. So we got to find that balance there. First, we need to root out the shit fans from the industry. I mean, you're never going to run them off on social media until social media changes. We have to start holding dickheads accountable at shows. If they act a certain way, if they throw something, we need to not maybe rely on security. We need to take care of it ourselves. If that means physically dragging them out of the building, then we do it. We need to start holding each other accountable. If we see a performer being disrespected, hey, enough. On the other hand, too, if we see a performer purposely going out of his way to be disrespectful for the fans, we cannot be too starstruck to call this performer out, and which we do a good job of doing on the Lioncast. The fan base as a whole needs to do more of that. You've seen a great job of that during the speaking out thing. It's kind of tapered back off again. So I think both sides have a lot of fixing to do here.
I will agree as well. There's a lot of disrespect on both sides. There's a big difference between the guy sitting at the show that is booing the heel and shit-talking the heel for being a heel and cheering the babyface. That's different. What we're talking about is fans cutting deep into wrestlers. Wrestlers are people, too. That's what it all boils down to. I mean, both sides have to work very hard to change how the landscape's going. The product in the ring and on the shows is phenomenal. This might be one of the better eras of wrestling. I mean, if not the best. The work rate, fantastic. Some of the men and women are busting their ass day in and day out for fan support and to give us a product that's watchable. And for it to be something that appeals to all genders and ages too. 20 plus years ago, when I first started watching the product, I didn't know any better at the time because I was a kid, but women being flaunted around half naked, not given time in the ring, swearing, cursing, having to use that to get the product over. But as an adult, I can look back, and I've actually been watching a lot of older WWE pay-per-views, like late 90s, early 2000s. And I mean, the talent was fantastic on the men's side, but you see a women's match and it's an evening gown match, bra and panties match, they get 5 minutes and they've ripped their clothes off, and that's all they get. Or mud wrestling and stuff like that. I mean, product itself and the talent has gotten a lot better. Both sides are to blame for how the atmosphere is outside of the ring. Like, we have so many different options to watch. We have Impact, Ring of Honor, AEW, WWE, New Japan, Stardom, AAA, MLW. You could literally find wrestling to watch almost every single day of the week. What did we have 20 years ago? We had, you get Monday Night Raw or you get Nitro. And once Nitro went away, you can watch Raw and SmackDown. That's all you get. Because it was before the big boom of the internet. But now the product's so good, and we as fans need to, I guess in a way, start respecting the talent more, but a lot of the talent needs to respect us too. With not making us feel dumb with some of the storylines and some of the things they do, because we're not kids anymore. I know a lot of companies are trying to appeal to children also, but we also need to be respected inside of the ring and outside of the ring too. The Joey Janela thing and Seth Rollins and his Twitter army, and that's just, none of that's cool. And like you guys said, both sides need to work a lot and fix a lot of things, because I've actually been kind of starting to get turned off from the product just because of all the garbage that's been going on. I'll pull up Facebook and see the Joey Janela stories, see Matt Cardona wins a title in basically an indie promotion and gets bottles and stuff thrown at him after he just bled for however long that match was with a guy who is pretty much a legit psychopath. I wouldn't want to get in the ring with Nick Gage. Nobody would. Barely. And if you do, there's something wrong with you too.
On a side note, real quick, I do find it hilarious that all these people are suddenly defending Nick Gage when they literally did an entire Dark Side of the Ring episode about why he's messed up. And yet everyone's like, yeah, that's a guy I want to root for. I'm like, what?
He served 5 years for robbing a bank. All right, let's ask the bank teller that he held up, who is still being paid restitution, what kind of person Nick Gage is to root.
This dude, I give Cardona a shitload of credit. We were kind of talking about this earlier. I love Matt Cardona. I mean, he basically got his dream job to be in the WWE, got himself over. WWE didn't give that to him. He did that himself. He got himself over. And when WWE saw that and they were seeing a talent that they didn't want the rocket strapped to, they were like, we can't have that. You got to take that down. And they gave him a forgettable U.S. title run. They put him in with Cena in a crap storyline, which normally if you get put with Cena, that's kind of a good thing, but sometimes if you're on his side, if you're not against him. But that went nowhere. And WrestleMania a few years back, they gave him, I still remember the pop, and I even was watching the pay-per-view, and I was in my earlier to mid-20s. I even popped for it. I was so happy for the guy because of all the crap that he's been given over the years. And for him to lose the IC title, the next night? Was it the next night, if I'm not mistaken?
Yep.
He didn't deserve that either. He's been a fan favorite for years. Then him getting put back in with Kurt Hawkins, then winning the tag titles. They had a forgettable reign with the tag titles too. And him finally getting released and him being able to do what he wanted. I love it. I mean, he went to AEW, Ring of Honor, goes to GCW, wins a world title, beats their top guy, basically, the face of the company, pretty much. He's just having the time of his life, and I love it. I mean, I'm all for it. And people are giving him death threats and backlash. Be happy for the guy. Everybody's worked a job that they hate and that they don't get respect in. And that's how I feel like what was happening to Cardona. I mean, you're giving ideas and you're trying to make yourself a better worker and a better talent and get more eyes on the product, and your boss is like, no, that's not what we want to do. They give you consolation prizes, basically. Everybody's had that shitty job, and he finally gets out, and he wants to do his own thing, and people are giving him death threats, and the whole death threats thing, that's ridiculous. Kind of makes me embarrassed to be a fan. Like, as soon as I saw that story broke and I saw the highlights of the show, because I didn't actually watch the show in its entirety, I was like, it makes me embarrassed to be a fan. I've said that a lot over the past couple of years. It really does. It's unfortunate.
So looking back on the pandemic, it clearly affected a lot of stuff, obviously, not just the fan interaction, which we've already gone over, but I think it's also affected the talent in a severe way, where it's kind of like anyone that's known anyone involved in the wrestling industry, or just entertainment in general, knows how much an audience can affect you. I think probably the most tragic thing that came out of the pandemic for the wrestling world, not in general, is unfortunately it was simultaneously the best and yet the worst was Brody Lee. Because it was the best because this idea of this really amazing villain character, this actual threat thing in AEW, he was all mysterious and dark, and he finally got to push, because Luke Harper was always a great wrestler and everything, they just didn't know what to do with him. And then to lose him so suddenly, it sucks, because I thought about this the other day, and the fact that he never got to perform as Brody Lee in front of a huge crowd of fans, and that's like really depressing. But I'm thinking about things like that. Looking back on the pandemic, what do you guys think should be a takeaway for wrestling? Like, what should be the takeaway from the pandemic going forward?
The takeaway here is to put on a show. You don't necessarily have to have the fans there, but there is a glaring need for the fans to be there, because they are a vital part of the atmosphere to a live show. They are a vital part to how a worker draws energy. He or she needs to draw energy from somewhere. They need that interaction to get their characters over. And also, a live crowd is whether they're listened to or not, is the ultimate judge of whether a gimmick is working or not. I think it was always known, but I think it was realized more than ever how important the fans are to a wrestling show, to an individual worker, to a company. Another takeaway from the pandemic is if there's a performer that's really over with the crowd, but maybe more limited in the ring, maybe is aging and can't do as much as he or she used to. I mean, this started years ago with Matt Hardy, but really, I'm talking in terms of the cinematic match. While it's not the most popular type of match, it's done right. It can really be very well executed and help really get over a performer, who's somewhat limited. Case in point, The Undertaker. His cinematic match with AJ Styles was very well received. Sting, another one, his cinematic match. But ultimately, the big takeaway is we are needed more than ever. And these performers, they need our support, and they need to know that we're behind them. These companies, they need our viewership to survive. So, I mean, I think the big takeaway is the fans are more important than anybody really realized. With that comes a huge responsibility for us fans to be better fans.
What I'm going to say is the biggest takeaway is the difference in seeing a crowd reacting to things going on versus an arena being empty or having a small crowd, which is talent for said company. They don't give you an accurate gauging of what's over and what's not. I mean, you can read into social media as much as you want, but until you actually have a crowd there, you're not going to know who's over and who's not. And actually seeing the talent live, too, and giving that reaction is going to give you a different opinion on the talent. I feel like Drew McIntyre was doing so well during the beginning to the middle of the pandemic era. And I feel like once the crowd started coming back in, everybody's starting to sour on him. Something to the opposite effect, I guess, would be Roman. Roman turned heel during the pandemic era. No fans, and the fans are reacting exactly how you want a heel to be reacted to. I mean, he's being so well received, and he's actually starting to win over the fans. And people can bitch and complain about things all they want. Another case in point is when Cena returned. He obviously got a pop. People obviously miss him. People will bitch about him day in and day out, about he was overpushed and blah, 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 but if you grew up in the generation that I grew up in, or watched wrestling in the generation that I watched wrestling in, Cena was always there. I mean, he was a consistent worker. He had a few injuries, but he was rarely gone from TV for a very long period of time. But at the end of the day, people still respect him, and people still care about him. People want to see him back. So my biggest takeaway is just stop complaining about little shit. Don't boo someone for being a hard worker. Don't boo someone for having a shit gimmick. It's not so much just sit down and enjoy the product and don't criticize it. I guess it's just don't be an asshole. And don't be that person who's going to, go on Twitter and say, oh, John Cena sucks and blah, 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 and then cheer him whenever he comes back. Just be consistent with how you're feeling. And that's what I'm trying to say is you don't really know what you got until you don't have it. We don't have Cena for so long. You bitch about him when he's there, and then he comes back, and boom, he's a superstar again. And, the people crying about how overpushed he is, he hasn't been an overpushed superstar in years. I mean, we're out of the Cena era, and I guess it kind of also goes back to being a better fan. I mean, don't bitch and moan and then do a complete 180 and turn your opinion over once you see that person or once you see a live show again. Just the product's getting put out there for us to enjoy. I mean, if it's something other people are enjoying, don't complain. If it's a genuinely shitty product, complain. But I was shocked when I was watching Cena's return at the positive reaction he got because of all the people that cry about him.
Yeah, that was surprising. I was expecting a pop, because he always gets a pop, but not like that. Like, that was like, dare I say it, that was like almost like rock level pop, wasn't it? Or was I going crazy?
No, I saw that too. I mean, we haven't seen him since what, Mania last year? Was that his last match?
Yeah, it was. It was the Bray Wyatt Funhouse match.
Yeah, I mean, he gave a lot to this business. He's a good person, and yeah, he was pushed, but it's not his fault that the company liked him.
See, like, one of my biggest criticisms is I hate people that are handed opportunity, like handed title shots. But I will make an exception with those that I refer to as the Dragon Slayers. Like, they're the ones who, especially if it's a top heel. Like, you got the guy who's like, oh, he's beating everybody. He's beating this guy, every other guy, which under the sun. And then the Dragon Slayer comes to the ring and is like, I'll face you. And, that kind of mentality. That's kind of how I see Cena. He's not the kind of guy who's probably not going to win the title, but he's going to put up a hell of a fight. And at the end of the day, it's going to put up a great show. I mean, he might win the title. I don't know. Maybe he will. Who knows? But it's the point of it is that kind of mentality of like the Dragon Slayer, like that kind of thing is cool. But it's only certain wrestlers I could see pulling it off, right? But you need to have like a major heel as the top guy in order for it to work. People think Cena just overnight became like this megastar. It's like people forget he really had to struggle, like a long time to struggle to get over, and he earned it.
And he almost got fired. It wasn't for him doing the whole Vanilla Ice shtick during that Halloween episode of Raw. I mean, he might not even be around. And he was in, OVW, worked his way up in OVW, debuted against Kurt Angle, and he was one of the almost wasn't. It was cool to boo him a couple years back, but I mean, there's guys, I'll genuinely respect the hell out of somebody like that who busts their ass and works their way from the bottom to the top. He's just genuinely a good guy. He's made a lot of wishes for a lot of kids, and he's not the most crisp worker in the ring. I probably bitched about him a couple times when I was younger, but damn it, I respect the hell out of him. He has my respect.
The great Keiji Muto has a series of rules that he calls the golden rules of wrestling, which he teaches his students in the wrestling world when he has them. And the number 1 and number 2, I 100% agree with. And I think any wrestling fan should 100% agree with it. He said the number 1 rule is you're less likely to mess up doing crazy moves. You're more likely to get hurt doing minor moves, which basically means like it's always the smaller stuff that will cause more damage, like the little mess ups, than the bigger ones. Like if you do leap outside of the ring, it's not going to hurt you. But if you misstep outside of the ring while leaping, that's going to hurt you. The other thing he said, which is what I'm bringing up to this point, the number 2 golden rule is respect is not owed, it is earned. And all wrestling, all entertainment, all sports, in any athletic ability or capability, you have to earn it. You have to earn the respect of your peers. That's the difference between someone like a John Cena or a Chris Jericho or even to an extent Kenny Omega. And then you have people like Randy Orton, like Jon Moxley, like Sasha Banks, who feel this sense of entitlement of you need to respect me because of what I do. I don't need to do jack shit. If I feel that you've earned my respect, you've earned my respect. But you're not entitled to that.
I'm glad you mentioned Sasha Banks. She's been since probably before Rollins. You just see her contempt for the fans oozing in almost every social media post. And it's honestly turned me off from watching her matches because I just know that she's in the business for the completely wrong reasons.
And the reason I'm such a huge mark for Japanese wrestlers, even in WWE, you look at Io Shirai, you look at Asuka, you look at Finn, you look at Shinsuke. If you look at them in or out of the ring, they're having fun. They are just having fun because at the end of the day, they're like, look, we paid our dues. We really did. And we have earned the right to enjoy our time to just get to be around the fans and interact with them. And they genuinely feel happy to know people come up to them. There was a vlog that Asuka did a couple months ago where, because she lives in Vegas, she was at this Barnes & Noble, I know, and she just walked around because she was going to buy a manga. And this lady who worked at Barnes & Noble almost started crying, like, oh my God, are you Asuka? And she's like, yes. And she's like, can I get a photo? She's like, absolutely. I'm like, that's genuine. Like, you can't fake that. These asshole wrestlers who are like, oh, this guy wants a photo with me. This guy actually wants to say hello to me.
And Sasha Banks.
Pay me $60 and I'll think about it.
Cameo.
Cameo only works in my mind for if it's like a celebrity who doesn't normally do stuff, it's cool. Or if it's people who just want to get an extra bit of cash, like Mick Foley doing it, cool. I mean, doesn't really need the cash, but he's like, I can't really see everyone, so those kind of things are cool. But those ones yeah, pay me. I'm like, who the hell are you?
Alexa Bliss is charging $450, and that again is probably due to all the creeps that mob her. Again, going back to the filthy part of our fan base, and they drive up that cost because they make us all look like slime balls and make them want to deal with us even less.
There are, and anyone who's a woman who listens to this podcast, just know we 100% respect you, and in fact, we appreciate you here at the Lioncast Wrestling Crew. If you're a woman and you're a wrestling fan, we really appreciate and respect you. Not just the men, but even wrestling women fans and wrestling women know that there are two dynamics of men wrestling fans. There are the ones who are just like, I enjoy this wrestler, or hey, I think this wrestler's attractive, or whatever. Just the basic bear of, wow, they're attractive, I like them, or oh, they're really nice people, I like them, or oh, I like their matches. Then there are the subterranean creepers, like the freaking chuds, the ones that live under the sewers that go, I like Alexa Bliss. Maybe if I send her a sandwich, she'll fart on it. I'm like, God, get back in the sewer, you. Get back.
Mark, I'm sorry.
No. It creeps me out because, like I said, that sort of stuff gives us a bad name. And we, as real wrestling fans, need to weed those guys out and say, get the hell out of the party. Because if we just stand there and let it happen, we're telling everyone it's cool. And it's not. We're here to defend you guys, and we're here to defend our love of wrestling. So finally, now that we've got through all the toxic bile of the current state of wrestling within the fans, what we've experienced through the pandemic, let's look towards the future. As of recording this is July 2021. So let's give a time frame of, let's say, the beginning of next year. So within January, what is a thing that you're hopeful to see? You could enjoy, you're hopeful to see it, maybe you want to see it, something that you think would happen or could happen or whatever in the next several months leading into January. I will personally say real quick, for me, as much as everyone is marking out about CM Punk returning and Daniel Bryan coming to AEW, Daniel Bryan will thrive no matter where he goes. Let's put that fact everywhere. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows how good he is. He's Daniel Bryan. Or Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon. Everyone knows who he is. They know how good he is. But with Punk, people have to remember, Punk has not wrestled in a wrestling ring for over a decade. That's not ring rust. That is ring barnacles. Like, that is insane how long that is to not even attempt to step in the ring. And I know a lot of people could point to examples like, say, Goldberg or whatever, but Goldberg hasn't ever been a wrestler. Goldberg is a guy who shows up, does a move, and leaves. Punk is an actual wrestler who hasn't wrestled in a long, long time. And with that being said, I think we all should take a fistful of salt and set our expectations way lower than they should be. The other thing I'm very, very hopeful of is with NWA, with Ring of Honor, with Stardom, and all these other promotions, I'm hoping if Impact and New Japan are able to coexist, to co-branch, to co-work together after over a decade of hating each other, then I think that there's a possibility that we could see other promotions doing the same. And I don't see why not have, say, like the NWA champion fight the Ring of Honor champion, or you know, someone from MLW come and fight someone from New Japan, or, you know, something like that. You never know with those possibilities, and I'm hopeful that that will happen. What about you guys? Is there like a specific thing you think is a possibility for this upcoming cycle up to like January?
I think if this Forbidden Door co-promotion thing is a raging success, you're going to see more major companies, perhaps the WWE, are going to want in on this type of opportunity, whether it means maybe having some sort of loaner system, something like that. I could see that down the road, especially, and I hate saying this because I sound insensitive as hell, but once Vince McMahon is gone, I really see a dawn of a new day with the WWE being more receptive to working with other companies. I really see these companies as they start putting on shows again, realizing the value that the fans add to the whole product as a whole. Fans realizing that maybe we got things wrong all these years with the treatment of the Cenas and the Reigns. When we start returning to shows, we start appreciating the hard work that these stars put on. The optimist in me eventually does see, you know, Twitter finally getting cleaned up. Eventually, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. How many more people are going to perish from suicide because of this toxicity that's going on online? Eventually, something's going to be passed. Something, Twitter and Facebook, or they're all going to be forced to clean this up. In the future, I do see things getting cleaned up to some degree. But most importantly, I really see the whole landscape of wrestling changing, and we're starting to see that right now with what's going on in Impact and New Japan, and to a smaller degree AEW. We're going to move past wrestlers being exclusive to one company. And honestly, as a fan, I'm absolutely excited and hopeful. I do not want to see this fail. Honestly, I think this will go way better than the Invasion of 2001. Whole different set of circumstances, though, but I digress. No, I really do see the landscape changing on several different fronts, and I do see the wrestling business entering into a new boom here very soon once this pandemic is further behind us.
So there's a few things that I want to see. I will agree with you guys. You guys kind of hit the nail on the head. I want to see talent exchange between, I don't care how many promotions. I'd say all of them, but I think that's a little ways away. It would be fantastic to see. I'm going to, I guess, lower my expectations just a tad. I think that's in the next couple years, maybe. I don't see it happening by the beginning of next year, as pessimistic as that sounds. But I see it happening. It's already starting. I mean, it's fantastic, and I'm giddy like a child for it. I know this is going to be me and my love for Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan, whatever you know him as. I want to see him eventually. Don't think it's going to happen this year, unfortunately, because they probably have it already set up. I want to see him in the G1.
Ooh, yeah.
Would lose
100% agree.
I would lose my shit. I'll even take my expectations lower. I want to see him wrestle a pure rules match against Jonathan Gresham in Ring of Honor for the pure title. As much of a mark as I am for Daniel Bryan, I can keep going. I want to see him in a match with Zack Sabre at some point. Daniel Bryan against Gresham and Daniel Bryan against Sabre have been on my dream match list for a long time, especially when he came back from injury, I was even more ecstatic and more optimistic that that would happen. Now that he's supposedly not under contract with WWE and going to AEW and getting dates in Japan, I see those dreams coming to fruition more and more. Different countries getting their lesser known guys into bigger promotions inviting these guys in. The European market is probably very good, but I don't know much outside of, the UK, England, Ireland, those countries. I don't know a whole lot of wrestling outside of there. The continent of Africa, I know a little bit about Australia, but not a whole lot. If it's going to be a boom, I want it to be a big boom. I want to see talent from all over the world, different countries, getting put on a national stage, I guess you could say. I just want how the Olympics are. I mean, I want every country to be represented at some point in time. Like, what culture did it a little? They grazed the surface a couple years back. They had a World Cup, and there was wrestlers from different countries I didn't really hear of before, and I've never seen that much of before. And that was such a fantastic idea. I loved it.
The Cruiserweight Classic was a great example of that.
Too.
Like, everybody from America to Chile. The original Cruiserweight Classic really, but that was one of the purest things I've seen the WWE produce in the last 10 years, and they haven't come close to even replicating that magic. To this day, I still watch that Cruiserweight Classic in its entirety every few months because I appreciated that so much just from the love of wrestling that came out of that.
And even in the Final Four, there's 4 different countries represented. Such a melting pot and such a diverse group. And even the Mae Young Classics, I mean, countries represented and wrestlers that I've never heard of before.
Right.
Wrestlers from India and wrestlers from China. I mean, I want to see that more on a larger scale. I guess that's more of a reach than me seeing all the promotions working together. But I'd love to see like an influx of talent from, different countries and people I've never heard of before getting their chance to shine and facing these top tier wrestlers and these top tier wrestlers putting them over in a good way.
Back on the Diving Cutter podcast, I proposed the theory of the Bullet Club World Takeover. And it seems as though that is finally coming to fruition in the sense of like all these promotions are interworking and interlocking through New Japan's door with the help of the Bullet Club. So I'd like to make a prediction now for all of you, and this is a half-hearted hope and think of what might happen. My theory is what's going to happen is all of these promotions, AEW, New Japan, Ring of Honor, Impact, Stardom, NWA, AAA, and maybe MLW. I'm not too sure on the last one. All of them are going to have a mega war. A war to end all wars of all of these wrestling promotions and maybe some indie wrestling promotions. A war where the borders of what is and is not okay will suddenly be stripped down. It will culminate in multiple matches through different brands. So you'll see the Ring of Honor TV title fighting on an AEW show, or maybe the AEW TNT champion will fight on NWA, or maybe the NWA champion will fight on Impact. Something like that. And I think that's going to culminate ultimately in a mega show. When I say mega show, I'm talking about a mega show with all of these promotions putting their top talent together. So Stardom's top talent versus NWA's women's division, or it will culminate in AEW and New Japan being the headline of the main event. And this gigantic show will take place in the mecca of pro wrestling, Madison Square Garden. That's what I think will happen, and that's what I hope will happen. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. It's got to happen. I think the business is needing something to launch this next boom period. I just think we need something different. We need something that's never been seen before. We're tired of seeing the same old shit as fans, okay? And they know that. But now they're in a position to do something about it. They're realizing there's value in working with other companies, that other companies aren't always a threat, that other companies, they have their own fan bases that aren't going anywhere. So we're not fighting over ratings anymore. This day and age now, everybody's streaming everything. Everybody's watching on DVR, so I can watch Impact, then watch NXT, and then watch AEW all in a nice 6-hour clip. So I got my eyes on everything. So now we're eventually going to get away from the thing that's been driving these companies apart, is the competition over ratings. And so once that resentment and competition with these other companies is over, I really think that it's going to really open the gates up. This really does depend on the success of the working relationship between Ring of Honor, New Japan, AEW, and Impact. So we'll see. But if this is a home run, look for bigger things. And I guarantee the WWE has people watching this. Their talent is watching. I mean, they're just because they work for a specific company doesn't mean that they got buddies in other promotions. They're hearing all the talk. We're on the cusp of something here. And whether that something is going to put us into a whole new era, it remains to be seen. Say these next 6 months are absolutely crucial to the future of the industry.
I can agree with that too. I mean, the pandemic's starting to fade away. We're starting to get fans back into stadiums, depending on if they're slowly moving in at full capacity or if they're at full capacity already. The company as a whole has fantastic opportunity. Give us what we as fans want. And I know it's not all about catering to the fans, but in a sense, it kind of is, I guess, because if it wasn't, I don't want to sound disrespectful when I say this, but if it wasn't for us, there wouldn't be wrestling. I mean, you can't wrestle and have no support. You can't have people buying merchandise. You can't have people buying tickets. You can't have people buying. You can't sell ad space to people if nobody's watching. Nobody wants to pay for ad space if nobody's watching. I really don't mean to sound disrespectful at all in the slightest with that, but it's the same in any business. You can't have a good product without selling it. If one day everybody decided not to watch football, you wouldn't see $157 million contracts for people. Nobody would care. I mean, nobody's going to watch something if they don't want to. From a business aspect, too, there is a pile of money to be made in an event like that. Live stream it all over the world. I mean, people will pay top dollar. I'm just speaking for myself. If there was a show like that, and I feel like something like that's going to be in an excess of what normal pay-per-views cost. It's definitely going to be over $50, $60. And put it on Fight TV, ESPN Plus, something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of revenue to be made from that. Merchandise, too. Ticket sales. Madison Square Garden. Don't even necessarily have it over just a one-night event. I mean, it could be something that could be multiple nights. It could theoretically be in multiple arenas. Have one weekend it'll be at Madison Square Garden. The next weekend, have it be the Tokyo Dome. I mean, another weekend for the European fans, have it in Wembley Stadium. I mean,
Yeah.
wrestling's so big that Wembley Stadium's massive, and it's like one of the nicest stadiums in the UK, if not Europe as a whole. You know, set up the shows in advance, have the talent there and ready, and, you know, have backup talent too. From a fan standpoint, we would love it. People are going to pay piles of money to see it. I mean, I guarantee there's people out there to pay $80 to $100 for a show like that. And
Absolutely.
I mean, even do a deal, you buy all 3 nights, or all 3 weeks, or whatever the case may be, and you get a discount on it. People are going to eat that up.
Absolutely. So I think we're almost out of time, but as we do with every Lioncast, we like to do a little fantasy handpick wrestlers, or we like to do fantasy thing. So with this whole idea of a cross-brand, cross-promotional series of matches, let's play a little bit of a booking game and see a wrestler from one promotion fighting another. So with that said, who would you guys like to see wrestle each other from a different promotion, one versus the other? I'll start off first. So I would like to see Thunder Rosa from AEW fighting Julia from Stardom.
I would like to see Jay White versus Malachi Black.
Those are both good ones. Potential for both of those is fantastic. I'm not going to cheat and use the ones I said earlier. The Time Bomb, Hiromu Takahashi. I don't think this has ever happened before. It could have, because he did a stint in Mexico. We'll say against Phoenix. Ray Phoenix from AEW. I think they would rip shit apart, and it would be phenomenal.
If he gets better, mind you. Again, ring rust. CM Punk from AEW versus Kenta to see who's the real owner of the GTS.
I'm going to go with Kazuchika Okada versus Cody Rhodes. I really think you got two guys that really positioning themselves as the face of the company, and I think the build to it would be very phenomenal.
This might be one that's might be out of left field too. Yeah, this one is definitely a possibility. I'd want to go Chris Bay and Robbie Eagles.
Just to shut his mouth, Sami Callihan versus Eddie Kingston in a hardcore death match.
I'm gonna switch gears and go with the tag match. All right, I'm gonna go with FTR versus the Foundation, Tracy Williams and Jay Lethal, or Tracy Williams and Jonathan Gresham.
That would be a technical masterpiece. It would be such a throwback, and it would be fantastic. I don't think this has happened yet, but I think it would be fantastic too. I'd say Okada and Nick Aldis.
A returning Will Osprey versus Kenny Omega.
Ooh, I like that one. All right, guys, here's one here. Out of left field completely. But let's take these two big guys. The real meat castle is. Let's take your boy Hammer, Alex Hammerstone, against Brian Cage.
I'd say either Danielson and Hot Sauce or Sabre and Hot Sauce. Tracy Williams. That's the one that I actually didn't think of right off the bat because I was thinking too much of Gresham, but either Gresham or Hot Sauce against Danielson. I mean, in a pure rules match, because that was Danielson's match whenever he was in Ring of Honor. So the one I said, there was one that we were talking about prior to recording was Cardona and EC3.
That'd be great. The out of left field one will be Minoru Suzuki versus Chris Jericho.
Oof.
Love it.
CM Punk versus Jay White.
Yep, I could see that. I feel like even if Punk has a significant amount of ring rust, I think Jay could carry him a little bit more. Jay has the ability to do that.
But just the promos alone is what would make the whole shit together.
This next one, we're going to take 4 teams and put them in a ladder match. We're going to take the Briscoes. We're going to take the Dangerous Techers. We're going to take the Lucha Bros. And for the 4th and final team, we're going to take Violence Unlimited.
Such a contrast of styles. If they did it right, that could work very, very well.
I think so too.
What part of Violence Unlimited would you put in that match? I'm curious.
Chris Dickinson, for damn sure, and then Tony Deppen.
Perfect. Chris Statlander and NWA Women's Champion, Camille. I think they're both powerful enough. I think that would be a totally different breed of women's match. Or I would say Camille and Jordan Grace from Impact. One of those two. I mean, it's going to be a powerhouse match.
Deonna Purrazzo versus Hikaru Shida.
Matt Taven, MJF, for the promos alone.
Yeah, that would be good. But I would definitely enjoy that. Brody King and Malachi Black.
Ooh.
Loser gets their tattoos removed.
Okay, so my final one, Hangman Adam Page versus Moose.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Not one that I would have thought of, but yeah, I like that.
I'm going to go with, we're going to do an X Division match. Josh Alexander. We're going to go Darby Allin. Go Ricky Starks. We're going to go Flip Gordon. And we're going to go Hiromu Takahashi.
I like that. Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't throw a big man in there because for some reason there's always some large person in one of those matches. I guess Josh Alexander would be the big guy in that one, but
Wardlow in there.
Yeah, throw him in there just to be the big guy that just whips people around the ring. This one might be out left field too, but I feel like they could work well together. I'm going to say Serena Deeb and Tennille Dashwood. It's a weird one, but something's telling me that could work.
No, that would work. I think that would work. I think that would work a lot, actually. All right, so I think that's going to do it for tonight's Lioncast Wrestling Crew, but make sure to stay tuned every month for a new episode of Lioncast Wrestling Crew. If there's any recommendations, if there's anything you'd like us to do or talk about, leave a comment down below. Make sure to check out our Facebook page and make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Say goodbye, guys.
Good night and goodbye.
All right, guys, it was fun. Thanks for having me. Talk to you guys later.
Das Vidania.
All right, see you later.